In this video, we are going to look at how to use web fonts in our CSS so that we can have more control over our typography. Previously, in discussing the use of the font family property within our CSS, we have stated that we need to provide a comma-separated list of fonts so that if a font is not installed on a user's computer who's viewing your web page, they have potential backup fonts that will match the aesthetic that you're going for in your designs. The use of web fonts takes that consideration and largely eliminates it. Certainly, there are things that can happen with web fonts that may cause unexpected results. I'll talk about that in a minute. But largely, web fonts give you the ability to use any font that you want and be confident that that is the font that will load on your design. So let's look at how we would do that using a service called Google Web Fonts. Now, to get to Google Web Fonts, you need to go to fonts.google.com. And from here, we can search pretty much all of the fonts that we want. So there's a couple things to know here. When you first come to this page, you're presented with every single one of their fonts that they have available. Currently, there's 1,064 font families. But we can narrow this search down just a little bit too. We can sort by what are trending fonts, what are the most popular, what are the newest, etc. And then we can sort by font properties. So we can choose the number of styles, the thickness, the slant, and the width. Um, and then we can narrow it down by different categories. So we can choose to only find serif fonts, only find sans serif fonts, display fonts, handwriting, or monospace. I'm going to leave all these filters in place because I'm just going to search for some specific fonts and show you how to use them. But just know that if you want to narrow it down, like what specific type of font you're going to use, uh, you can do that here in the categories and the font properties. So if you want just like a narrow serif font, you can find that here. Also, if this sentence doesn't look good to you, what they try to do here is they try and give you a lot of representation of the various characters that each font has. So if this doesn't work for you, then you could type a different sentence up in here. So this is my sentence, for example, and then you can see that in the preview. So anyway, let's load up some fonts. So I am particularly taken lately with a font called Canet, and I'm going to use this as my heading uh, for my website. So I just want like a big, thick um, font for my heading. So I'm only going to select the ones that I want. So specifically, there's a lot of different variants here, but we don't want to select all of these because um, we don't want our users to have to download every single font, especially if we're not going to use it. So we only want to select the fonts that we are definitely going to use in our design. So all I'm going to use is this semi-bold 600. So to select it, I simply click the button here that says select the style. And then it gives me this ability to start using it. So we'll come back to this, but this is how we're going to end up using the fonts. So we'll close that off, and I want to find a different family, a different font. So let's just grab Open Sans because that's a pretty common one. Go back to Browse Fonts, and I'll search for Open Sans. Here we go. And then for this one, I'm just going to grab the regular 400 and an italic because I might need that too. So now I've got three fonts selected. I've got Canet for my headings, and then I've got Open Sans for my body copy. So now that we have that, here in the top right-hand corner is this like three squares and a plus sign job. So if you click this, it'll show you the font families that you've selected. So we selected Canet, and we selected these two variants of Open Sans. Now what Google has done for us is it provides us with a link to a CSS file, and the CSS file lives on Google servers. Now this is what I was talking about when I said that web fonts can have some unexpected results. So if your expectation is that the server will always be up, you might be wrong about that. Even Google servers fall over sometimes. So just make sure that you always have a fallback in your CSS. So in this case, we're going to have sans serif, basic sans serif for both of these fonts as the fallback. So what we do now is we take this CSS link and we'll copy that. We'll come over to our HTML, and then in the head of our HTML file, we'll paste that link in. And then here, now we can start using the font. So I'm going to make an H1. This is my heading. And then a paragraph. We'll just put some lorem ipsum in here. And then I'm going to make this last little bit of text here. We're going to italicize it so we can see that italic text. So I'll just put a span around it, and I'm going to target that with CSS. So we've got the content in. Let's actually use our fonts. So down below, the link that we just copied is our property and value combinations. So I'm going to copy this for KNet, come back to the CSS here, and we'll plug that in to the H1. And now you'll see I have KNet as my H1 heading. Let's do the same thing for Open Sans. Come back over to the CSS, put a selector in for paragraph. Again, we're just using element selectors for both of these, and now you can see I've got Open Sans here. Let's go ahead and select a span, and we will make that italicize. So we'll span an element selector. We'll say font style italic. And now we get the italicized font that we loaded up from Google Web Fonts. So that's it, pretty straightforward. The main thing is select your fonts, copy this link here to the CSS file that Google makes for you, paste it in your head, and then use these property value combinations for the font family and the web fonts that you have that you've selected in your CSS selectors. So by doing that, you can pretty much be assured that your users will get the font that you intended for the design. So that's it. Hope that is helpful and hope you can use it in some of your projects.